Hello, everyone. Welcome to episode 91 of Overdose and Chill. I'm Sam Elliott. I'm the Managing Director of Overdose Sydney. I'm joined today by Lena, who's my Senior Performance Marketing Manager, Director. And we're obviously joined today by Christine from Girls in Tech. She's a board member at Girls in Tech, and during her day job, she's works at Adobe in its strategic partnerships team. So today, we're going to be talking about all things girls in tech and how people can get involved. Christine, can you tell us a bit more about yourself and a bit more about what you do at Girls in Tech?
Thanks, Sam. Thanks, Lena. And thanks, Overdose, for having me. So I'm Christine Rodrigues. I have been working with Girls in Tech for a couple of years now. We're a global not-for-profit. So we were started back in 2007 in Silicon Valley. And back then there was a need to sort of elevate that sort of women in tech environment around what our founder, Adriana Gascoigne, calls the programmer culture. So we've been around for since 2007. We're in about 50 cities globally. So we have a number of chapters around the world. We started in Melbourne in Australia about 5-6 years ago. And I got involved as an ambassador back then to sort of fly the flag and sort of get involved in the movement. Since then, we've expanded into Sydney and Brisbane, where we have people on the ground. We're predominantly a not-for-profit that focuses on education, networking opportunities, and allowing sort of females to elevate their position within the industry. We do a lot of activities, like pretty much monthly at the moment. We've got so many things going on, everything from panel discussions to hackathons. So it's a great way sort of to bring the community together. And at the moment, we've just sort of kicked off again for another year, just having our conference in May. So we've got like all this buzz going around Girls in Tech at the moment, which is super exciting. And like you said, in my day job, I work at Adobe. I've worked at a number of tech companies over the years. So that's kind of how I got involved in being an ambassador and sort of championing this movement for other women.
Perfect. Thank you very much for that. We're broadcasting live on LinkedIn, Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube. We've got a questions channel in there, so drop your questions in as we work through this today. More questions from you guys, the better. I get to be the guy on the side today, and I leave most of this conversation but for Lena and Christine to have this conversation and move this on forward. So jump in with your questions. I'll monitor those and I'll bring those in when they come in. But yeah, Lena, what questions have you got for Christine?
One of the first questions is, why do you think is it important for businesses to have more women in tech?
I think as a general statement, I mean, diversity and inclusion is super important for any business, and not just women in tech, but like across the board, being able to have a different mindset, a different way of thinking, a different way of working, people with different backgrounds and experiences, and they really everybody rounds out, a project or a company in their own way. So for me, it's about sort of enabling a business to have different ways of thinking and people that bring different things to the table in not just those senior leadership conversations, but at every level of the business. And I think where this movement's come from at the moment is being in technology. There was a little bit of shift where we want to get more women in STEM, and there was a disproportionate amount of males in the industry, at a point. So I think that's where we're saying, okay, well, how do we expand the knowledge, expand the experience, and get more sort of opinions and different ways of thinking at the table?
Yeah, right. And it's kind of have you seen a big change in the industry since you started in this role? And is it, there's always that thing, if you look at an agency or a technology company, there's women in certain roles and there's sort of less women in the development side or the more tech end. Is he seeing that change?
Yeah, I'm definitely seeing a change. I'll take a step back. So I came into this industry in the e-commerce space about 10 years ago. And back then I was working for PayPal, and PayPal was quite small it was quite a small company in this country. And I had come out of telco, which was the tech back then, iPhones and internet. When I started, it was black and white phones and Snake. So I've come through these sort of tech companies, and I've seen, for me, I was like, well, I don't really have this issue. I've been surrounded by all these great female leaders and GMs of VPs of businesses, and I've come through this organization kind of with my blinkers on to, I kind of feel that there's an issue, but I wasn't experiencing it. And when this sort of girls in tech movement sort of got brought to the table originally for me, I went to a couple of women's events that were run by an external party probably about 2012, and I was mortified by the messaging and the narrative around it. And I was like, oh, this is not for me. Men weren't invited. You know, there was this whole you can't have a family and a career advice. And I was like, oh, I don't think this is a thing for me, and I don't think this messaging is right. So I just sort of stepped out of it. I said, I'll never go to another women's event in my career. And then a few years later, I got invited to something different by someone I knew and trusted who'd started a tech business. And I went and I started listening. And just because it's not happening to you doesn't mean it's not real and it's not there, right? So I started listening to other people, and I was always in a marketing role or a strategic partnerships role where the balance was kind of even, or if not, it was swayed in the female favor in those departments. But then when you start getting involved in more technical businesses, or where you see that there is this disconnect, and they're not big companies that have been doing this for years and trying to get it right, like a Vodafone or a PayPal, you come into smaller businesses or businesses that are less established, or it's not front of mind. And yeah, there was really an issue. There was like some businesses that didn't have females at all. I still get calls from recruiters today, and half their premise of wanting to hire me is because I'm a female and they've got like 5 guys in their leadership team. And I'm like, that's not a reason why I want to work for your company, to help you balance the and that actually happened like 2 weeks ago. So I feel there is a shift. Like there was an issue, but I'm seeing as more and more of these not-for-profits or organizations and these platforms are enabled, slowly, the movement is sort of changing from, you know, how do we be more inclusive? How do we get more females? There's still an issue sort of in that females going into STEM. I think we still need to start off at that university or school layer, or even as far as primary school, and start like back then. But there is a shift coming through, definitely in an industry like e-commerce. It's, you know, it's not, I don't feel like it's as it was 10 years ago when I first started. I remember being the only female on a boat once. It was like 50 guys. And actually there was one other female, and they were all actually wearing the same outfit because they all kind of turned up with this mindset that we're going on a boat. And so they all had like beige chinos and a white shirt. And we were 2 women on a boat with 52 people. And I was like, this is not normal. But now that would never happen. I don't think that would ever happen today at all. So I do think in our industry, we've made massive leaps and bounds to a decade ago.
Yeah. You mentioned in there about getting recruiters coming across to you saying, like, you know, they're looking for a woman in their businesses, like, you know, working in an office where, you know, we're still predominantly male, we're trying to sort of, you know, make those changes. How do we present ourselves in a way that it doesn't feel like, one, it's just, you know, just something for like as a token thing to try and get more women to the business, and come across as authentic, but also present yourself in a way that's people want to work for you, and women want to work for you, and people from a whole bunch of different backgrounds want to work for you too.
Yeah, I think that's a really important thing, is recruitment, because a lot of people either come to me, offer me a job for that reason, or they come to me. A lot of companies will pipe up in my LinkedIn inbox saying, you know, how can you help us? You know, we want to recruit more females into our business, and what do we do? How do we address that? And as I said before, there is a candidate pool issue where not enough females either have the qualifications or they're applying for the roles. So I think there's something to be said in well-rounded. I think even the other day someone picked up language in one of the job ads that they were reading. They're like, this language doesn't feel right to me. So I think it's making sure people are, a number of people in your business are looking at how you're actually putting those roles out there. I feel that in the technical space, I mean, there are a lot of females coming out into, you know, with like great developer qualifications and, you know, working in all the data sciences and things like that. We just have to be able to attract those females and find out where they are. I think a great starting point is, if you want to attract people to your businesses, you need to play where they're playing. You need to show up where they're showing up. There are plenty of other associations like Geek Girl Academy or Code Like a Girl, or even the alumni through the universities, or even further along, there are women's leadership groups that you can also get involved in. Is sort of walk the walk to show people that you're serious about wanting a well-rounded candidate pool. And it's a well-rounded candidate pool, not I'd like a female to apply for my job. I had a lot of people come to me recently saying, you know, because a lot of people are moving around and they're like, well, we're not getting enough females. Not even one female applied for like a sales leader role in a company. And I'm like, well, you need to sort of change your perception. It's not going to happen overnight. You can try a headhunt, like that's a start. But you've got to imagine if there's one female who's excellent in that industry and that industry is not very old, then they're probably getting hit from a lot of angles. And that's what happens in some of these tech sort of scenarios, is there's like one or two in that sort of brains trust that have been there for that long, that they're the only person doing it. So it's really getting out there and demonstrating that you're supportive of it. It's not going to change overnight. You do want to advertise that you're an equal opportunity employer. If you have, if you have reasons to sort of get out there, and if you have the means to get out there into different forums, like I said, whether it's meetups or groups or associations, or it doesn't have to be a sponsorship, but our events in Girls in Tech are free. Taking your team along and showing them, or inviting them, or educating them and saying, hey, did you know these things exist? Coming up with like an in-action workable group within the business to sort of demonstrate that, did you know that there's these 5 groups that meet up in our area that talk about this, etc. Like giving the tools to the team, and it kind of spreads from inside out. Like you've got to get the inside right before people start coming from the outside in.
Yeah, right. Like I think we've done, we've done a lot recently about trying to change, some of our policies, particularly around making sure that because we've moved to a full flexibility model, we've got some other benefits that are coming in the next half of this year as well, which is sort of really around benefiting everyone. But it really does sort of swing towards more of a, well, not swing towards more of a, it provides sort of opportunities for parents and opportunities for people who need that flexibility. But hopefully us pushing in that direction finds us in the right stead. Is there a concern? Because whenever we're looking for people to apply jobs, we always have that perception, at the very least, that there's there's always been a thing in the past about imposter syndrome with women, that they have that thing where they're like, oh, I'm not going to apply for this job because I can't do it. Whereas, I've met plenty of people coming in who told me that they can do absolutely everything that's on the job description, but you interview them and you realize that they can probably do about half of it. Is there a gap there that how do we change that perception for people to just give things a go, try and push in there, try and find the right thing? Because sometimes we're not always hiring 100% points on those job descriptions, right? Like you end up hiring sort of for most of it, and a lot of it's about cultural fit. And how do we increase people to give it a crack at sort of applying for these things?
Yeah, there's a couple of things in that. So I'm not a recruiter, but I see a lot of these issues. I'm just going to preface that. But when there is this imposter syndrome, and we did a session on it like a few weeks back, where we actually had a session about imposter syndrome and had people talk about it. So it's very real, but it's not limited to females. But there is this consensus that a lot of females will try meet the laundry list. Some of the things that I would think about in those job advertisements is like, what is mandatory? Like, what is the absolute, you need this to get this job? And what are the kind of nice to haves? And I've seen some job ads where they really separate those and say, you must have this, but it's nice to have that. And giving people the opportunity not to tick an entire list. Like if you have this giant list, I've seen some stuff lately, like, you must have 10 years experience in this and 5 years experience in that. And some of those things haven't even been around for 10 years. So I kind of look at this job ad and have a little giggle, because these people don't exist. Like they're designing the job ads for the unicorn, but they're not real. And then you get this sort of influx of individuals that go, oh, I don't really need to know how to do that. I'm pretty sure I could wing that. So I'll apply and say I've got 10 years experience in some AI that wasn't invented 10 years ago, because it's just how it's written. And you kind of lose these people that you're not going to give a chance to, because they're like, oh, I don't know how to do any of that stuff. So think about the mandatories on your list. Think about, when you do want to attract, you kind of got to think about how to sort of frame that you'll give people a crack. And like I said, it starts internally. So a lot of the opportunities that I've had in the organizations that I've worked in have been through secondments or, little projects I've been pulled up onto and like things like that. It's like, you've really got to set that platform that you'll also, give people a chance within your business to fill those, like to make those gaps for other people to come in. So allowing, maybe someone isn't a programmer, but they'd like to know how to code. It's like, can they get involved in one of the projects? Maybe not as, they're not got hands on the tools, but maybe they're involved in the background to see how it works. And then there's a platform for them to think about, how do I expand my knowledge and stuff like that. So part of it is internal and making those shifts in your organization to open up space. And the other is, how do I sort of convey what do I really need this person to do? I love going to job interviews and they try to sort of ask you to tell them everything. I'm like, well, we all know I can do it. I wouldn't be applying. I'm not going to regurgitate everything that I've done in my career, because that's just a waste of everybody's time. Most interviews, you're just looking at if they're culturally going to fit. If you think they're BSing you their experience, asking them to, testing them on some of the things is not really relevant. So maybe think about what's really important. And really to promote, like I think I see a lot of businesses talk about on their LinkedIn how they've given, I think you guys did it as well, like you promoted someone internally and you've like shown that you've taken a chance. And, they might have started off in your customer call center, and now they're like a marketing exec. It's like telling those stories of your business is really important, because as soon as someone applies for your role, they're going to go onto your socials, your LinkedIn, anything. They're going to Google you. They're going to look at you in the news. And if those things bubble up and they can see that you take chances on people, that's going to swing in your favor. Obviously from a genuine perspective, not disingenuous, but, like that's kind of my, just get out there and sort of make it known that you do those things.
Yeah, absolutely.
When businesses start going on that journey, I think quite often the situation happens that you do have a much lower amount of women in teams than men. How can businesses support women in such kind of teams?
I think it's opening the dialogue. The last thing you want to do is kind of make it a closed door conversation. And sometimes it is the leaders that take the action, but there's no point in the CEO supporting the women's movement and having one-on-ones if the whole team isn't taken on the journey. And that's with any sort of D&I initiative, whether it's, whatever it is. So I would say is open up the dialogue, have those lunch and learns, have those action circles. Maybe some businesses have a, First Nations action circle and a D&I one and a Pride one, create those conversations within the business where people can cross collaborate in different teams, as well as giving the teams themselves a project to work on and something to sort of work towards together. We don't want to polarize or isolate anyone that's been doing great work to now, unless they're like completely misogynist. Like anyone who's in their job and doing a great job at it shouldn't be felt like they're no longer wanted, or, that's not the type of person you want in the organization. Like there are some great people doing great work and they just happen to be in those roles. So it's not polarizing them, at the same time bringing them along the journey. I mean, I'm not saying we have to talk about female issues at the forefront of some of these conversations, but I would say when I go to meetings and it's just women, the conversation starts off a very different place than when there's men in the room. Like it's not, how's your day? What did you do? What sport did you watch on the weekend? Like it is completely like, how's your brain fog going? Well, how's your, all these things they do in the household. So there's all these different conversations that happen when it is, gender specific in a room. But I guess it's making that awareness so that, if you do have a team of I remember I've been in a few teams where there's like seven males and myself. And it's hard some days when you come in and you just completely feel like an outsider. So it's like having that conversation is with being inclusive. If you're all going to play golf, doesn't mean that I want to go, but just throw me a bone. Maybe I don't want to play ping pong, but you can include me. Like it's just getting them to know that they're allowed to include others. And that's kind of where it starts. It's opening that dialogue. I know I'm using really delicate examples. I don't want to go too crazy at it, but it's the little things that make a difference at the end of the day.
Yeah, I think it's important across the board with that as well, right? You're gonna, you talked about diversity and inclusion, and you're gonna have people in your business who, they don't eat meat, they don't drink. You've got people who have a disability, which means they can't participate in golf, they can't do other things as well, right? So finding, ensuring that everyone can participate in everything, or at the very least is invited to participate in everything as well. You can't have every single thing be for every single person in the business, but making sure that everyone's included along the way is that real critical point, because, you know, like there's going to be people who want to play video games at night, and it's like not everyone wants to work and play video games, but hey, you know, like there are probably a bunch of people there who'd like to be invited to do it, but don't have the don't feel that they can ask to be invited. So you have to make sure that you step up and invite everyone along the way.
Yeah, and I just was guilty of being generalized and saying golf and ping pong. But yeah, it's try not to be generalize. You know, not all females have one way of thinking. Not all females want to be mums or don't want to be mums or etc. Like if they're not drinking, it doesn't mean they're pregnant. Like that's just, you know, these little throwaway stuff. Like it's just not having your blinkers on, not having your biases. It's trying to be a little bit open. Yes, you know, there are going to be some people that swing towards a certain, you know, there's things I'm not interested in that they're interested in, and that's also okay. It's like they're allowed to be differences in people. Not everybody has to be into the same thing. It's only an issue when it becomes isolating, or if it errs on the line of bullying, or it errs on the line of, you know, them actively being not included or like excluded. I don't want to say excluded, but like, you know, actively being in that situation. As long as everybody knows that, you know, you're allowed to have different interests inside or different opinions inside and outside the workplace. But, you know, we just need to make sure we give everybody an opportunity to have their say or be part of that dialogue.
Perfect. You mentioned earlier that you talked about being in a room where it was like, you know, 7 guys and you, and that conversation that would happen where it's just like the 7 guys in the room and they're all sitting there talking about sport. And if it's just if it's all women in the room, then they, you know, you talked about like asking the questions about brain fog and all that kind of stuff. Have you seen either way, right, where there's men introduced into a room full of women, or a woman introduced into a room full of men, and that as that sort of balance changes, that those conversations change in a positive way?
Yeah, what I would say is when I first started out, I would very much try to mimic the situation to feel like you're involved. Like, oh, I know all these things about all these sports I have zero interest in, because you're trying to get involved in the conversation, right? So but these days, it's what are the things that we can talk about that we're all interested in? You know, what are the things that we can, you know, sort of say, maybe don't get brought into the boardroom as conversation starters. Maybe there's some little ground rules set around that. You know, maybe instead of kicking off the meeting, how was your weekend, or what sport did you watch? Maybe it's like, hey, whenever we start a meeting, why don't we all bring, you know, what's some cool AI tech that we saw, or what's some cool thing that we saw, like just so we can get everybody involved in the conversation on like a level playing field. I feel when you find those things that you're all interested in, and because you all work in the same place and you're all working in tech, maybe sometimes those things are tech related, you know, bringing stuff like that to the table to, you know, for those conversation starters. Like a lot of people like food, you know, I'm not going to discount that. There are other things you can talk about, like it doesn't have to be work related, but maybe there's, you know, something around, you know, giving people an opportunity or a conversation starter without them sort of diving into these other directions every time, you know, you walk into a room. In social settings, it's a little bit more difficult because you're out there and you're talking to people that you don't know. But I think also there's something in helping individuals in your organization learn how to network and learn how to talk to people. And, you know, it's interesting when you go to networking events and someone doesn't know you, what they ask you when you're a woman versus what they ask you when you're a man, and you hear it because you're standing there and you're like, well, how come they asked him about, you know, XYZ and sales and this and that, and they asked me about something completely not work related and a bit ditzy? And I kind of feel that's changing, but we need to sort of make sure that, you know, when we're in those rooms, we have the ability to draw from a war chest of topics that we can talk about that aren't polarizing.
We've got a question from Rob Kane. We love Rob. How do we get more women involved in technology? I want to balance, and especially in the solutions architects, developers, and tech sales.
Yeah, a question I get asked daily from everyone outside my own business. It's like I said, you've got to really be involved in those. You've got to find where they are, right? There is like a lot of things that we do to try and bring more women up through the STEM education sessions. Like, you know, I'm getting approached now by primary schools. I used to only get approached by high schools and unis, and like people are seeing this as something that we need to do. So while that's going to take a while, we need to find out where these people are. There are plenty of people graduating and have skills. I know that when I go to events, I've had women come from all over different roles, a lot of the technical roles as well, because they don't have anywhere else to go. Like they don't have any other forums. They don't feel comfortable talking about it at work. So they come to, you know, Girls in Tech or She Hacks or, organizations like that, even not in the face-to-face situations, even in the virtual situations, is there are lots of different established organizations that have, a resource or a pool of these individuals. The objective is not to go in there and start recruiting. Sometimes I have events and 50% of the room is recruiters, and that's a bit of an issue. That's not why we're running the event, but it's getting out there and showing that you're involved. Like, I am very conscious, if we have a panel, not to have a white female only panel. That's not very inclusive, right? So it's getting everybody involved in those conversations. If there is no sort of established group in your arena, in your area, in the particular field that you're looking in, start that conversation. Like, start that conversation on LinkedIn. Start one if you want to. Get involved with people like us. Start that conversation. Maybe we have, we guide a topic towards that. But there are people out there. They do exist. It's just getting to where they are. And when we get there, not scaring them off like deers, like, headlights, because we don't want to get there and, just feel like we're just trying to recruit them. It's coming at a level of, we know you're in tech sales, you're a small commodity there, or, solutions architect particularly, but I know some great females in tech that are there. It's just a matter of building that relationship with them. And funnily enough, everybody kind of knows each other, especially in a lot of these industries. Like, they've all worked together, they've come up through the ranks together, they've done courses together. Everybody knows other people, and it's asking within your networks, who would they recommend, who do they know, et cetera, to try get those introductions and form relationships, not recruitment funnels, is my tip.
I suppose it's about how to be attractive as a company as well, right? So, that was something that Lena and I had spoken about like, how do we present ourselves in a way that, we look friendly to an outside audience, right? So we look like the kind of place that people want to work. We have the right policies that people want to work, that environment that people want to work in, having that full flexibility model that we've got, having that ability for people to come in and learn and grow. And, as you pointed out, we're really focused on hiring really good, young, talented people and bringing them up through the company as well, which is critical, right? So it's an important part of who we are. And, Lena and I spend a lot of time looking at the team and going, all right, well, who is in here that, has the ability to take that next step? How do we build a roadmap and a journey for those people as well? So it's not always about finding those people, it's about bringing them up internally.
Yeah, and those policies, like, I see a lot of policies at the moment, like, flexibility is an interesting one, because a lot of people promote their flexibility policy, which is great because everyone wants a flexible workplace. And a lot of people, I see, like, a mum and dad and 2 babies on a little social ad. There's nothing wrong with that. Like, it is designed to attract parents and maternity leave. But, like, some people, like myself, I just went through 5 rounds of egg freezing, so flexibility was really good for going through, like, a medical issue. Some people don't have children or want them, and flexibility allows them to get up, walk their dog, go for a surf, have a coffee, and come back before they start their day. And you'll attract just as many people promote, like, so not polarizing your benefits towards a particular skew, because actually they'll attract a broad range of talent, and that is what you want, is a broad range of individuals, come to the party, not just, we'll frame it this way and maybe we'll get some women come to the party because, we've got this act that looks like this. And not to discount the ones that I saw this week, but it kind of felt for me, I'm like, oh, well, it's not just for them. Actually, I would love to have a flexible working where I can go to Pilates and, and start my day at 9:30 instead of 8, like, things like that. Yeah,
absolutely. I think we get more people with dog parents rather than more than anything else. They're all like, oh, I get to stay home with my dog. I'm like, cool. Exactly. We've got another question here from Jenny. As a woman in tech, what advice would you have given yourself when you first started off in your career?
Oh, I've got 2 things. One's a bit controversial. One is the ability to say no to things that you don't think you're comfortable with, things that you think you should be doing. Some people don't tell you that you don't have to be at the bar at 3 a.m. with all the guys in there, because they feel that that's how you become part of the boys club. Like, you just don't have to do that. You don't know that when you're 26 and out of uni and trying to build a career. So saying no to things that don't suit you or fill your cup is one thing. And the other thing is something that I did do, but I would still tell myself to do it again. And I kind of did it by chance and didn't know I was doing it, was getting sponsors, like getting people who are on your side. And Sam, you've always been a great sponsor of mine in the, 10 years we've known you. It's like finding the people that will talk about you when you're not in the room in a positive manner about what you do at work or your skills, and being able to sort of find those people. It doesn't have to be necessarily a mentoring relationship. Like mentoring is its own place, but finding those sponsors and having this sort of posse around you and being that posse for other people is always a great thing to do. Like I just nominated someone to be on the board of Girls in Tech, and I'm just like singing her praises and, trying to, give this person a leg up because I've seen what they do. Like you've got to be those sponsors for others. And at the same time, when you find people that gravitate to you, whether it's because of your positivity or you're into the same thing or you like this quirky AI tech about, dogs that lick your screen, etc., you just got to find that person, delve into what you can do and what they can do, and sort of just be there to have each other's back. And it will pay dividends because, like I said, a lot of these industries, they're still quite small compared to most others. Like we're still in an infancy stage of establishing sort of where we're going to go, and tech's the one that's going to grow the fastest and the biggest. So setting those foundations now is super important.
What was the controversial one in there? Was it the saying no in?
Saying no, yeah. I remember being in a conference once. I'd come back from a sabbatical and I was in Las Vegas and I just did not want to be out anymore. I was like, guys, I'm going to bed. I've had enough of this. It's like 3:00 in the morning. And someone's like, I don't like this version of you, this, eat, pray, love, just come back from Bali, relaxed version of you. I'm like, oh, I don't really mind. I actually don't really care anymore. I just want to go to bed. Nothing good happens after 3 a.m. And the fact that you want me to hang out with you means that I've done my job and this relationship is working. So I feel you don't 10 years prior or even 5 years prior, I would never have had this, the tongue to be able to say no. I'd just like, oh, the client's asking me to stay, I should stay. But you don't have to do that.
I think it's interesting because you're saying like, 5 years, 10 years prior and then 5 years prior. It's like, I think it's that hard thing if you probably built the reputation and the quality of relationships in there already in that 5 years. And then you're kind of building off it and that ability to say no. I suppose the real risk factor, or want of a better word, is how do we as managers or leaders in teams make sure that we've got a safe environment at these events, so that one, people can say no, or that if there is an issue that people can come to you and feel comfortable coming to you to stop something from happening or step in.
Actually, safe place is something I heard a lot about this week in another session I was in. Is like they kept using the term safe place, and it is part of that, having that dialogue in the business. Like I said earlier, is bringing those conversations to the forefront. It's about diversity. It's about your behavior outside the business. It's about, if you don't want to dial into something at 7 a.m., that's okay. We can record it. You can listen to it later. Like it's making sure that they understand that not everything has to be done in a certain way. And if they feel that dialing into 6 a.m. meetings that aren't recorded is not suitable to them, is allowing them to say that in a group. Like, whereas some people will just suck it up and do it. It's creating that safe working environment where you can actually voice your concerns. And it might be because they want to walk their dog and have a coffee, and that's okay. Like it could be just that, but it's creating that safe space. And that's how you become an employer of choice, is to have that, ability. Not throw your hands up and not go to meetings in the middle of the day. Maybe that's not the wisest choice, but there are things around that you can sort of influence in your career. And that's about hiring people that have the autonomy and the maturity to bring those things to the table, and not out there requests. I'm saying like, little things.
Absolutely.
We've been talking about like sponsoring and mentorship and also having very inclusive conversations. Are there any other things I can do as an individual to help?
I think as an individual, it's like I said about the business starting inside, you've got to start inside. You've got to find out what your passions are and where you fit in some of these movements. Like you can't be an advocate for everything. You can support things and have an opinion but you can't show up to every event and be in every single forum and be everywhere, because I've tried that and it's not possible to be everywhere all at once. But if you do have something that you like, if it is women in tech or diversity, or I'm really into accessibility tech at the moment, it's something that I'm really passionate about and want to get more involved in. You have to create that space understand it, and then find a way to sort of make an impact. And your impact is not going to be gigantic overnight. Like, it's taking those small steps. It could be just talking to your manager and saying, hey, I'm at this mid-career marathon. I'm not really a leader, but I'm not like, a grad, but I'm at this point and I'd like to influence other women, whether it be in the business or out of the business, and like going to them and asking them, like, how do I get involved? What do I do? Or coming to organizations like ours and saying, hey, I've got a couple of hours a week. I'd like to volunteer. How do I get involved in what you guys are doing? And sort of take those baby steps. You can't change the world overnight, but there's things that you can do in a small way. The first Girls in Tech event that I spoke at, I was not a leader. I asked to keynote. I didn't understand why I was being asked to talk about my career, because I was like, this was 5 or 6 years ago, and everybody else that was speaking was a politician or a VP or a founder or a CEO. And I was like, what do I bring to the table? But it's that relatability. So it's not always the leaders that need to bring in the topic and talk about it. It can be people that, peer-to-peer. You can do peer-to-peer mentoring. I learned about something yesterday called Project F, which is like a mentoring platform where they match people together, so you might volunteer your time to be either a mentor or a mentee. They do say you learn a lot being a mentee. Being a mentor from your mentee. So there's there's something beneficial in actually giving back. So as an individual, it's find what you have to offer or what you'd love to offer and give. And it might be just an hour a month, but you can always find somewhere to focus your passion.
Yeah. It's interesting because your thing about, dividing your time and finding the things that you're really passionate about and making sure you focus on those is, I think it's really important. I went to a sustainability conference a couple of weeks ago, and I was sitting there going, like, I care about this, but I guarantee there's someone in my business who cares about this probably more than I do. And they should be here, and I should be sending them to this rather than me being here. And it was something we talked about, that it's like, there's going to be people in our team who really care. But how do we like bring that out of people, right? Because it's not just a leadership thing, right? It's about providing a leadership scenario where people feel open to come out and talk about the things that they're passionate about. How do we set ourselves up so that people feel comfortable coming to us and going, this is what I care about. I want to be the person who's the go-to person for this, or, they want to sort of sponsor something in their business as well.
I think there's two things to this. There's, having that open conversation, whether it's an all hands or something around, maybe as a leadership team, you boil it down to like 5 or 6 and you say, hey, we're going to think about supporting these things in a certain manner, depending on how big your team is, like who wants to own, or, groups of people that want to own these different categories. And maybe it's accessibility, maybe it's First Nations, maybe it's pride, like creating that forum. Maybe you start with a few and asking people to volunteer as a starting point to get involved in, why don't you guys come back with the plan of what you want to do over the next 12 months? Doesn't have to cost money, doesn't have to do anything. Like, what do you want to do? And part of it could be them suggesting going to events or what have you. Another part is actually, and it's an out there one, and I'm probably going to get slapped on the wrist by HR, but, having these volunteer days where you allow your team to take a day out a year, or whatever many days a year, and put it towards something they're passionate about. So, I used to have these when I was back at Vodafone, and you could pick, a charity, or you could pick a movement, or you could pick something that you could just go to and spend your day in your passion, right? One guy went and decided he flew himself to Queensland so he could sit with the baby sea turtles when they hatch, and someone has to guard them when they walk to the ocean to make sure they get eaten by seagulls. But he was really passionate about animal conservation, and that's what he wanted to do with his day off. Like, he funded it, but like just having the ability to say, I'm going to take a day to do this. And maybe that's how you kind of see how people spend their day, right? Some people might volunteer at a charity. Some people might think about this Girls in Tech. They might go to a code camp. Like, there are different things. So allowing them the platform to see what comes out of it, or sort of introducing a few topics and saying, hey, we're thinking of making some action circles. Here's a few ideas, and having that conversation. We don't know what we don't know. I feel that's one thing. Like, we don't know what the next out there thing is. We don't know what, that there's a group that feels like there's a minority. Like, we don't know, especially when we're blinkered to a lot of this stuff. Like, a lot of these things that we talk about today, we didn't talk about a few years ago, but it wasn't until something happened or there was a catalyst that brought it to our attention that now means that it's a focus, right? And so allowing people to sort of give them that that open forum to sort of say, hey, how would we like to spend as a group, either as a whole team, or if you've got a big enough team, like little tiger teams within your organization to focus on things like that.
Excellent.
How can businesses, for example, get involved with the Girls in Tech movement?
So us specifically, we have ability to get involved as a sponsor or a national partner. We have quite a few businesses, like from really high end, big corporates like Telstra, McKinsey, etc., EY, that sort of come along. We also have people reach out to us, that are in smaller businesses and just say, hey, how can I get involved? And if they don't have the means or the funds to be a sponsor, I'm like, well, starting off, just send it to your team, like put an email out, get people to dial in. It's free. So there's always, that's how to get involved with us. And most other organizations are very similar. You've got this sponsorship path where you can go and you can make a big stamp and a big splash if you've got the funds. And we do smaller things. Not everything has to be ginormous. But then there's this other path where it's just, like I said earlier, showing your team what's out there, sending it to the group. If someone's going to something that they think is interesting, allowing, like, maybe there's a Slack channel, like meetups you're going to or something, and they can be like, hey, I'm going on this Ruby on Rails, or hey, I'm going to this Girls in Tech event, or hey, I'm going to this thing, like allowing them to sort of communicate amongst themselves about how to get involved in these things. Because like I said, you don't know what you don't know. And as a business, the starting point is just to show up. It's just to be there, or send someone. If it's something that costs money, maybe there's one ticket a year and there's a way to win it. I don't know, like through a passion project or a, internal competition or something like that.
Well, there's a call out to my team if there's anything you guys are passionate about. I know you're all watching. You better be watching. And come and talk to us about what you're passionate about and how you want to get involved. We've only got a couple more minutes left here, so keep those questions coming in. Really interested.
Kind of a shameless plug. We're gonna have a Girls in Tech event on the 7th of July. So add me on LinkedIn because I'll push it out. It's not ready yet, but it'll be pushed out on Monday. So I expect everybody on this call to at least register or forward it to your teams to register about our event. It's going to be about allyship. So it's a little bit about what I talked about today about sponsorship, mentoring, but it's about allyship. And one of our partners is putting that on. So that's virtual. Everybody can attend. So shameless plug. Sorry to interrupt you.
No, all good. I was interested because one of the questions that Jenny had earlier for you was about, what advice would you give yourself? I want to turn the tables and point to Lena and say, what advice would you give to yourself as someone starting out in this career?
Oh, that's a difficult one. Just try to do it. Be not afraid and don't be scared of when you get a pushback as well. So I would always just try and keep going and reach out to people for help. I think that's an important part as well. And that's why I've been asking, how can I get involved to help women in tech as well? Because it is definitely a passion of mine as well to support women. So shout out to teams as well. If you need anything, reach out to me as well.
Yeah, I think it's a great point. Like, there are so many people within teams that you can talk to, right? Like there's people who are your age who work in a different section of your business. There's people who do your job in other businesses, and trying to find that network of people. And, as you were saying, Christine, that's people sponsoring you when you're not in the room and talking about you. I think that goes two ways. I certainly know that when you've been in the room and I haven't been there, that you'll always talk kindly about me, and I'll do the same. And it's about having those colleagues that you trust and you rely on to have your back at all times. Finding those people, finding your people out in your industry is a critical thing to getting yourself moving in this career and finding your place as well. Yeah,
definitely agree on all those points. And then Sam, like, I guess what would you give your advice would you give yourself? Like, on this topic specifically from, when you started out in tech?
It's kind of interesting, right? Because I started out sort of outside of tech, and I worked in a predominantly female industry. So I've sort of always been around sort of having female managers and female colleagues, and worked in a couple of businesses where I was the minority male rather than being the majority male. And then going into businesses where it's completely flipped, where I was in one place where there was just one female in the entire business. And I think I learned later to sort of speak up a bit more and, you know, call out, you know, the crap that was going on, that, you know, I probably should have had the strength and the voice to say things a little bit earlier. And, you know, it was more about how do we create an environment where if there was a woman applying, that they would actually want to work here, right? Because I guarantee in some of the places that I've worked, if a female developer had walked into that room, they would have just gone, why in God's name would I want to work in this place? So finding the voice to make sure that things are being done properly, that people's, you know, prejudices aren't sort of coming into the fore, that, you know, you're creating a safe environment before you need to, right? So you're trying to create the right place for people to work in. Yeah. That'd be mine.
Awesome.
All right. Well, thank you very much, Christine. This has been a really great conversation. Really, really appreciate it. Don't forget to follow Christine on LinkedIn. She's going to be plugging, you know, things coming up in July. Can't wait to hear about those. We'll get our team out to those as well, get them involved. I'm really looking forward to it. Thank you very much, Christine. Enjoy the rest of your Adobe day off, which, you know, I'm extremely jealous of. So flying off to Queensland now, and I'm going for a lovely weekend. Have a great time. Thank you very much for your time today, and thank you everyone for watching and commenting and asking questions. So thank you very much, and we'll see you out there in the Twitterverse.
Thank you for having me. This was great.